Welcome back, everyone. Before we dive in, make sure you drop your thoughts and the lessons you took from this story in the comments. And don't forget to like and subscribe. Let's get into it. My name is Elijah Roberts. I am 35 years old. I work as a senior project manager for a logistics company in Dallas. And until a few months ago, I honestly believed my marriage was solid. Looking back, I should have known something was wrong the night my wife insisted we go to that fancy steakhouse downtown for her birthday. Aisha never cared for expensive places. She always said they were a waste of money and that she would rather have good takeout on the couch than some overpriced meal with tiny portions. But there she was that night, dressed in her best outfit, practically buzzing with excitement as we walked into Clayton's Prime in downtown Dallas. She wore a deep emerald dress that hugged her in all the right places, gold hoops that caught the light every time she moved, and heels I knew she would complain about by the end of the night. Her hair was freshly done, laid perfectly, and she kept checking her reflection in every reflective surface we passed like she was nervous about more than just turning another year older. The table was already set for 6. Her usual crew was there, the same group of women who spent their weekends gossiping and planning their next social media posts. Tanisha sat closest to Aisha's chair, her wig curled flawlessly, scrolling on her phone between sips of wine. Keisha had her new designer purse propped on the chair beside her, a bag that probably cost more than our monthly groceries. Lauren, of course, sat at the end of the table, the natural ringleader, smiling like she knew something no one else did. "Happy birthday, baby," I said, leaning down to kiss Aisha on the cheek as I pulled out her chair. She gave me a bright smile that did not quite reach her eyes. "Thank you for bringing me here," Aisha said, smoothing her dress as she sat her day. "I know this place is not cheap." I shrugged. "It is your birthday. You deserve it." The waiter appeared almost immediately, all professional charm, and took our drink orders. The women ordered cocktails with names that sounded like they were made for Instagram captions. I asked for a beer. As he walked away, the table filled with the usual chatter, work gossip, relationship drama, trending shows, and the predictable chorus of laughter every time someone made a sharp comment about someone who was not there. I did what I usually did at those dinners. I listened when I could, smiled when appropriate, and checked my phone under the table whenever work emails popped up. Quarter end was coming, and a couple of accounts were on fire. Aisha knew that and had told me earlier. "Just be there, Elijah. That is all I want." I thought I was doing exactly that. About halfway through dinner, while I was working on a perfectly cooked ribeye, Aisha suddenly put down her fork. I noticed because the sound around me shifted. The table went quiet. These women were never quiet. Tanisha stopped mid-story. Keisha set her phone down for once. Lauren leaned forward just slightly, like she was about to watch her favorite drama unfold in real time. I looked up and saw Aisha staring at me with a strange expression, somewhere between determination and fear. Her fingers trembled as she dabbed her mouth with her napkin. Then she cleared her throat louder than necessary. Her voice carried farther than it needed to in that restaurant. "Elijah," Aisha said, "I think we need to talk about something." The air changed. I could feel other conversations at nearby tables slowing down. "Okay," I said, setting my knife and fork down and giving her my full attention. "What is going on?" Aisha took a deep breath. "I've been thinking about our marriage," she said, "and I do not think this is working anymore." For a moment, I thought I had misheard her over the soft jazz playing in the background. "What are you talking about?" I asked. My voice was calm, but my chest tightened. Aisha straightened her shoulders like she was making some kind of grand announcement. "I want a divorce," she said, in the same tone someone might use to order dessert. "I just do not feel fulfilled in this relationship. I need space to find myself." The entire table stared at me now. Tanisha's eyes were wide. Keisha's lips were parted. Lauren looked almost excited. I could feel the weight of other people's attention from nearby tables, that hush that falls over a room when something real starts happening in public. I could practically hear forks pausing halfway to mouths. I took a slow sip of my beer, set it down carefully, and really looked at Aisha. This woman I had been married to for 4 years was sitting there with an expectant look, like she was waiting for me to fall apart, argue, or beg her to reconsider. It hit me, all at once, that this was not spur of the moment. She had planned this. "Okay," I said simply. One word. No theatrics. No argument. Just a quiet acknowledgement. The word seemed to hang in the air like a dead weight. Aisha blinked several times, clearly not expecting that response. Okay, she repeated, her voice rising an octave. That is it. Just okay. You said you want a divorce, I replied. If that is what you want, we'll get a divorce. I'm not going to sit here and argue with you about it in front of your friends in a room full of strangers. Tanisha shifted in her seat, whispering, Aisha, under her breath. Keisha looked between us like she was watching a tennis match. Lauren's eyes were glittering, waiting for a bigger explosion. You are not even going to try, Aisha demanded, her face flushing. You were just going to walk away. You made a decision, I said. My voice was still calm, which seemed to bother her more than if I had shouted. And I am respecting it. Lauren let out a quiet, disbelieving laugh. Wow, she said, shaking her head slightly. That is cold. I ignored Lauren. I pulled out my wallet and placed $60 on the table to cover my meal and the tip. Enjoy the rest of your evening, I said, standing. I looked at the women one by one. Their mouths were hanging open like they had just watched a car accident. Ladies, have a good night. Aisha, we will talk about the details tomorrow. Aisha reached out a hand as if to grab my arm. Her eyes suddenly panicked. Elijah, wait, that is not. But I was already stepping away. I walked out of that restaurant without looking back, leaving behind the rising murmur of voices, the clink of glasses, and my wife's voice calling my name. The valet brought my truck around, and I tipped him more than usual just to get moving. I drove home in complete silence, the city lights blurring past the windshield. My mind was strangely calm. No yelling, no dramatic inner monologue, just a quiet sorting of facts. My wife had asked for a divorce in public like it was a performance. I had given her the answer she claimed to want. When I got home, I hung up my jacket, loosened my tie, and poured myself a proper drink. The familiar scent of bourbon grounded me. I sat in my recliner in the living room, the television off, just listening to the hum of the refrigerator and distant traffic. That was when my phone started buzzing. First a text from Aisha, then another, then calls. One after another, the screen lit up with her name. I watched it for a while, the constant vibration against the coffee table like a heartbeat that did not belong to me anymore. Then I flipped the phone over, screen down, and took a long drink instead. If she wanted to play games, she picked the wrong person. I had always believed that when someone tells you who they are, you should listen. That night, Aisha told me exactly who she was. She was someone willing to gamble with our marriage for a reaction. I heard her loud and clear. Morning came with gray light filtering through the blinds and a dull ache behind my eyes. I reached for my phone and saw 23 missed calls and 47 text messages. I stared at the numbers for a moment, then quietly deleted them all without opening a single one. Whatever she had to say, it could wait until I had a clear head. I showered, dressed for work like it was any other Tuesday, and made myself a simple breakfast. Aisha's mug still sat in the cabinet where she always left it, but I did not reach for it. I took mine, poured coffee, and drove to the office through the usual Dallas traffic, the world moving on as if nothing had happened. By the time I reached my office, Aisha was calling again. I watched her name light up the screen, then let it go to voicemail. I had quarterly reports to finish, a meeting with the regional director, and a team waiting on my decisions. The rest of my life did not pause because my marriage had cracked open in a steakhouse. Around 10 o'clock, there was a soft knock on my office door. My assistant, Angela, peeked her head in with an uncomfortable expression. Elijah, she said quietly, your wife is here. She seems pretty upset. I could already hear Aisha's voice echoing faintly down the hallway, sharp and demanding. I sighed, set my pen down, and straightened my tie. Send her in, I said. And Angela? She paused. Yes. Hold on my call for the next 15 minutes, I told her. No one through unless it is an emergency. She nodded and vanished. A moment later, Aisha burst through my office door like she owned the building. Her eyes were red and puffy from crying, mascara smudged underneath. She was still wearing yesterday's makeup, and her hair, which had been perfect the night before, was now pulled back in a messy bun. She looked like she had not slept. We need to talk, Aisha said, crossing her arms over her chest. Her voice was rough. You cannot just walk away from our marriage like that. I leaned back in my chair, studying her for a long moment. Yesterday, you said you wanted a divorce, I said evenly. Today, you are upset because I agreed. Help me understand the logic. Her eyes flashed. It was not supposed to go like that, Aisha snapped. You were supposed to fight for us, Elijah. You were supposed to show me that you care enough to try. The word supposed echoed in the room like a bad punchline. So this was a test, I said. My voice stayed level, almost professional. You decided to humiliate me in public, to see how I would react. Aisha's face flushed. She looked down for a second, then back up. The girls said sometimes men need a wake-up call, she muttered. They said if you truly loved me, you would fight to keep me. The girls, I repeated slowly. So let me get this straight. Tanisha, Keisha, and Lauren all knew about this little performance ahead of time. Aisha shifted uncomfortably. They were just trying to help, she said defensively. They have seen how distant we have become. How you barely pay attention to me anymore. You are always on your phone, always working. I stood up and walked to the window, looking out at the parking lot below. Aisha's sedan was parked crooked across two spaces, like she had screeched in and jumped out without thinking. Aisha, I said quietly, in 4 years of marriage, when have I ever given you reason to doubt my commitment? When have I ever played games or tested you? That is not the point, she shot back. That is exactly the point, I said, turning around to face her. You and your friends decided to treat our marriage like a social experiment. You announced you wanted a divorce in front of a restaurant full of strangers, and now you were surprised I took you seriously. She started crying again, those soft, manipulative tears that used to make me want to fix whatever was wrong. Today they just made me tired. She stepped closer and reached for my hand. Please, Aisha said, her voice breaking. It was a mistake. I love you. We can forget this happened and move on. I was scared, Elijah. I thought I was losing you. I pulled my hand away gently but firmly. No, I said. We cannot just forget this. Because now I know that when things get tough, instead of talking to me, you will run to your friends and cook up some scheme. Now I know you think our marriage is entertainment for other people, that you were willing to gamble with it to get a reaction. Do not say that, she whispered. You are making it sound worse than it is. I already contacted a lawyer this morning. I continued. We can do this the easy way or the hard way, but we're getting divorced. You want it out, and I am giving you what you asked for. Aisha stared at me like she was seeing a stranger. You are being cruel, she said. I'm being honest, I replied. There is a difference. I walked back to my desk and picked up the phone. I have work to do. My lawyer will be in touch with yours about the paperwork. She stood there for another minute, tears tracking down her face, maybe hoping I would change my mind or break down and beg her to stay. When I began dialing, she finally turned and stormed out, slamming the door behind her hard enough to rattle the frame. I finished the call to my lawyer, then sat back in my chair. For the first time in months, my mind felt strangely clear. It hurt, yes, but more than anything, I felt a kind of grim certainty. When someone shows you their authentic self, the smart thing to do is believe them. 2 months into the divorce proceedings, on a cloudy Thursday, I was grabbing lunch at the deli near my office. I ordered a turkey sandwich and a cup of soup, intending to eat quickly and get back to the mountain of emails waiting on my computer. As I turned to leave with my tray, I spotted Tanisha sitting alone in a corner booth. She was staring at her phone with tears streaming down her face, her shoulders hunched, her usually perfect hair a little frizzy at the edges. This was the same woman who had been grinning like a cat at Aisha's birthday dinner, watching my marriage implode for her entertainment. I could have kept walking. I probably should have. But curiosity tugged at me. Rough day? I asked, pausing by her table. Tanisha looked up, startled, then quickly tried to wipe away her tears with a napkin. Oh, she said, her voice shaky. Hi, Elijah. She gestured awkwardly. You can sit if you want. I sat across from her, setting my tray down. What happened? I asked. I did not add, what did you expect? Even though it floated in the back of my mind. Tanisha let out a bitter laugh. You could say that, she said. Adrian moved out yesterday. Adrian was her husband of 6 years, a construction supervisor who coached youth baseball on weekends. I had met him at a couple of cookouts. He always struck me as a steady, decent guy. I'm sorry to hear that, I said, and I meant it. Whatever Tanisha had done, Adrian did not deserve collateral damage. He found out about the whole birthday thing, she continued, apparently needing to talk to someone. Aisha told Keisha who told me that you actually went through with the divorce. When I mentioned it to Adrian, he was furious. Mentioned it how? I asked. Tanisha's face crumpled. I was complaining. Honestly, she admitted. I said we were shocked you did not fight for Aisha like we thought you would. I said you just walked away. Adrian looked at me like I had grown a second head. She swallowed hard and continued. He kept asking questions. He wanted to know whose idea the whole thing was. At first I tried to say we all came up with it, but he would not let it go. He asked, so you helped convince your friend to pretend to blow up her marriage, just to see what her husband would do? She shook her head. I had to tell him the truth. It was mostly Lauren's idea, but I went along with it. I encouraged it. What did he say? I asked. Tanisha looked down at her hands. He called me manipulative, she whispered. He said he could not believe I would sabotage someone's marriage for entertainment. He said he did not recognize the woman he married. The irony was not lost on me. Adrian had discovered something about Tanisha's character that made him question their entire relationship, just like I had with Aisha. He said any woman who would do that to a friend's marriage, Tanisha continued, was not someone he could trust with his own. He packed a bag and went to stay with his brother. Said he needed time to think about whether our marriage was worth saving. I took a bite of my sandwich, letting her words sit between us. Tanisha wiped her eyes again. The worst part is, she said quietly, he is right. When Aisha first came to us with the idea, it seemed, I do not know, dramatic, but harmless. Like we were helping her figure out if you truly cared. But after hearing Adrian and seeing everything fall apart, I realized how horrible it actually was. She looked up at me, her eyes red-rimmed. For what it is worth, Tanisha said, I think Aisha made a huge mistake. Adrian is right about you. You were one of the good ones. You did not deserve what happened. I stood and gathered my trash. The thing about trust, Tanisha, I said, is that once it is broken, it is almost impossible to rebuild. Aisha broke mine, and apparently you broke Adrian's. I left her sitting there in the booth, probably wondering how a birthday dinner 2 months earlier had led to her marriage crumbling. As I walked back to the office, it occurred to me that the dominoes had started falling, and they were not done yet. 3 weeks after that deli encounter, I was leaving the gym in the evening, sore and sweaty, when I ran into Reginald in the parking garage. Reginald had been dating Keisha for about 2 years. From what I had seen at various social events, he was head over heels for her. He worked as a software engineer, quiet and thoughtful, the type who analyzed everything before making a decision. Hey, Reginald called, jogging to catch up with me as I headed toward my truck. You got a minute? His expression told me this was not casual small talk. I leaned against the side of my truck, nodding for him to go ahead. He ran a hand over his short beard, an anxious gesture. Keisha told me what happened at Aisha's birthday, he said, about the whole fake divorce thing. I gave a short nod. Seems like word is getting around. I replied. She did not just tell me, Reginald said, his voice tight. She was bragging about it. Said they were trying to teach you a lesson about taking your wife for granted. I waited, watching him struggle with whatever he needed to say. The thing is, he continued, it got me thinking about other stuff. Little things that did not seem like much at the time. Like how Keisha is always testing me. Testing you how? I asked. Reginald let out a humorless laugh. She will pretend to be upset about something just to see how I will react, he explained. Or she will tell me a former boyfriend texted her, just to watch me get jealous. Last week she said she was going out with some guy from work, just as friends. When I told her I was not comfortable with that, she laughed and said she was just seeing if I trusted her. She said it was cute how insecure I got. I shook my head. That does not sound like trust building, I said. No kidding, he replied. He kicked at a loose piece of concrete. But here's the part that really bothers me. Yesterday, I was at Keisha's apartment when Lauren called. She put it on speaker without realizing how loud it was. They were talking about Tanisha and Adrian splitting up because of what happened. My interest sharpened. What did they say? I asked. Lauren said Adrian was being dramatic, Reginald said. She said Tanisha was better off without him anyway. Keisha agreed. She said men these days cannot handle strong women who know what they want. Reginald's jaw clenched as he continued. Then Lauren said something about how you were probably just looking for an excuse to leave Aisha anyway. And Keisha laughed. That was when it clicked for me. I realized I had been dating someone who thinks relationships are games to be won or lost. Someone who gets entertainment from watching people suffer. What are you going to do? I asked. Reginald was quiet for a long moment, staring at his hands. I confronted her last night, he said. I asked if she thought what happened to you, and Aisha was funny. She got defensive, said I would not understand, because men do not grasp the emotional complexity of relationships. Emotional complexity, I repeated. Right. So, I asked her directly, Reginald said. Do you think what happened to Tanisha and Adrian was worth it? And she said, well, if Adrian cannot handle Tanisha having some fun with her friends, maybe they were not right for each other anyway. I shook my head. The complete lack of accountability was staggering. Then I told her I thought the entire thing was cruel and manipulative. Reginald went on. You know what she said? She said maybe I was not mature enough to understand women's friendships, and that if I had a problem with her loyalty to her friends, maybe we should take a break. Another test, I said. Exactly, he replied. So I called her bluff. I said, you were right. Maybe we should take a break. He let out a breath. The look on her face, Elijah. Suddenly, it was not a game anymore. It was me actually questioning our relationship. She panicked. I could picture it perfectly. Keisha had always liked being in control, pulling the strings. Having someone turn the tables on her would be terrifying. She tried to backtrack, Reginald said. She said she was just emotional about her friend going through a rough time. But I kept asking her to explain exactly what part of destroying marriages was supposed to be helpful or funny. She could not answer. She just kept saying I was being unfair and taking things out of context. So I left. He pulled out his phone and showed me his screen. 17 missed calls from Keisha, just that day alone. She showed up in my office yesterday crying, he said. Said she would do anything to fix things. But how do you fix someone's character, Elijah? How do you repair trust with someone who thinks emotional manipulation is normal? It was the same question I had been wrestling with for months. How do you rebuild anything with a person who sees relationships as power struggles instead of partnerships? The worst part, Reginald said quietly, is that I really loved her. Or at least I loved who I thought she was. I'm just not sure that person existed. We stood in silence for a moment. Two men who had discovered the women they loved were not who they had pretended to be. Adrian reached out to me yesterday, Reginald added. He said Lauren's boyfriend is starting to ask questions too. Apparently, she let something slip about helping plan the whole thing. What is he asking? I said. He wants to know what else Lauren might be capable of, Reginald replied. He has seen how everything played out, and he is connecting the dots. Reginald pushed off my truck. It is funny, he said. They thought they were testing your marriage. Instead, they showed all of us who they really are. Now, everybody has to decide what to do with that. By the 4th month after the birthday dinner, the fallout had spread through their entire social circle like wildfire. One Friday night, I was having dinner at a sports bar downtown, watching a game on the big screens and eating a burger when I spotted Jared across the room. He was hunched over a beer, looking like someone had hit him with bad news and then reversed over him. Jared had been dating Lauren for 3 years. He was a paramedic, the kind of person who worked long shifts and still found time to help friends move or show up for birthdays. I debated whether to approach him, but something about the way he stared blankly at his drink made the decision for me. Mind if I sit? I asked, walking over with my beer in hand. Jared looked up, surprised. Oh, hey Elijah, he said. His voice was hoarse, like he'd been arguing or not sleeping. Yeah, sure. Have a seat. I slid into the booth across from him. You look like you have had better days, I said. Jared let out a hollow laugh. That is putting it mildly, he answered. He stared at the condensation on his glass. I do not know if you heard, but Lauren and I are taking a break. That is the polite way of saying she moved out and we are probably done. I had suspected as much from what Reginald had mentioned, but hearing it confirmed still hit me. What happened? I asked. Reginald said I might want to talk to you, considering what happened at Aisha's birthday. Jared took a long sip of his beer, then set it down with a soft thud. Apparently my girlfriend was the mastermind behind the whole fake divorce thing, he said. Lauren planned it. Not just planned it. From what I have pieced together from 3 different people, she is the one who convinced Aisha to do it in the first place. I thought back to that night at the restaurant, remembering how Lauren had been leaning forward the most, eyes bright, watching my reaction. When I confronted her, Jared continued. She did not deny it. She was proud of herself. She said she was helping her friend figure out if her marriage was worth saving. You did not see it that way, I said. Jared's eyes darkened. Are you kidding? He replied. I have seen what divorce does to families, Elijah. Through my job, I have responded to domestic disputes that got violent. I have seen children caught in custody battles. I have watched people destroy each other over property and spite. And my girlfriend thought it would be fun to push someone toward that for entertainment. The waitress came by and Jared ordered another beer. I took a sip of mine and waited. So I asked her, he said, what if they actually got divorced? What if they cannot fix things? And you know what she said? He shook his head. She said, well, then Aisha would know she made the right choice. Convenient logic, I said. Exactly, Jared replied. In her head, it was a no-lose situation. Either you fight for Aisha and prove your love, or you leave and prove Aisha was better off without you. She never considered that what she was asking Aisha to do was fundamentally wrong. Jared ran his hands over his face. The more we talked, the more I started seeing other patterns, he said. Remember last year when you and Aisha had that argument about spending Christmas with your family versus hers? I nodded. Yeah, it was a small disagreement. We worked it out in a day. Lauren came over the next day, Jared said, at least for what Aisha told her. Lauren spent an hour saying you were selfish and controlling for wanting to see your own family. She kept telling Aisha she needed to stand up to you. She kept calling it red flags. Aisha pushed back at the time, so Lauren backed off. But she did not let it go in her mind. That was news to me. I had noticed tension in Aisha over the past year, but attributed it to work stress and life. Then there was your promotion last spring, Jared went on. You started working more hours. Aisha was upset, but you two talked it out. Lauren was furious that Aisha did not demand you refuse extra work. She kept telling her you were putting your career over your marriage. I was starting to get a clearer picture of how deeply Lauren had been poisoning my marriage long before the birthday dinner. The dinner was not spontaneous, Jared said, sounding exhausted. Lauren had been building up to it for months, planting ideas, suggesting Aisha needed to test your commitment, convincing her you did not appreciate what you had. How did you find all this out? I asked. Reginald told me, Jared said. After he and Keisha broke up, Keisha got angry and started spilling everything. She said Lauren had been planning something big for months. She said Lauren was convinced you were taking Aisha for granted and needed a wake-up call. His second beer arrived, and he took a long drink. When I confronted Lauren with all of that, she did not apologize, he said. She doubled down. She said Aisha's marriage was doomed anyway, and she was just helping speed up the inevitable. She told me I should be grateful she is such a loyal friend. Loyalty is a strange word for that, I said. Jared nodded. That was the moment I realized I was dating someone who could cause that much damage and feel good about it, he said quietly. Someone who sees other people's relationships as her personal entertainment. It hit me that I might be dating a person with no real empathy. So you ended it? I asked. Not right away, Jared admitted. I told her I needed time to think. I want to stay with my brother for a few days. The more distance I got, the more I realized I could not unsee any of it. She started texting and calling nonstop. At first she was angry, telling me I was overreacting. Then she laid on guilt, talking about everything she had done for our relationship. Then came bargaining, promising she would never interfere in anyone's business again. He pulled out his phone and scrolled through messages, letting me see the stream of texts. They swung from rage to pleading to threats in a familiar pattern. The final straw was yesterday, Jared said. She showed up at the fire station during my shift, crying and making a scene in front of my crew. My captain had to ask her to leave. She was shouting about how I was abandoning her, insisting she had done nothing wrong. He shook his head. Later that night, she followed me home and sat in her car outside my building for 6 hours. Neighbors called the police. They warned her once. When she came back again the next day, my captain said if she showed up at the station again, he would file a formal complaint for interfering with emergency services. I finally filed for a restraining order this week. I never thought it would come to that. We sat in silence for a while, the noise of the sports bar washing around us. The worst part is Aisha is completely alone now, Jared said eventually. Tanisha is dealing with her own divorce. Keisha is desperately trying to get Reginald back. Lauren is too busy playing the victim to support anyone else. Their whole friend group has imploded. I thought about Aisha, probably sitting at home wondering how everything had gone so wrong so fast. Part of me felt bad for her. A bigger part recognized that this was the natural consequence of surrounding yourself with toxic people and making toxic choices. Reginald said you are handling all this pretty well, Jared said, studying my face. How are you not more angry? I am angry, I admitted. But not at Aisha, not exactly. She made her choices. I am angry at the waste of it all. We had something good, and it got destroyed for no decent reason. I am also angry at myself for not seeing it sooner. But I do not regret how I handled that night. No regrets? Jared asked. None, I said. If I had begged or made a scene like they expected, it would have just validated their whole approach. Sometimes the only way to deal with manipulation is to refuse to play the game. Jared nodded slowly. Lauren keeps saying you did not fight for Aisha because you did not love her enough, he said. But I think you did not fight because you loved her enough to take her seriously. When she said she wanted out, you respected that choice. It was a generous way to look at it. Maybe more generous than I deserved. You know what is funny? Jared added. Lauren thought she was testing your marriage, but she ended up testing all of ours instead. And most of us failed her test by refusing to tolerate her behavior. Most of you passed it, I corrected. You just did not pass the test she thought she was giving. 4.5 months after that birthday dinner, I was sitting in my home office reviewing the final divorce papers when I heard a car door slam in my driveway. Through the window, I saw Aisha getting out of her sedan. She looked nothing like the woman who had glided into Clayton's prime in that emerald dress. Her hair was unwashed and pulled back in a loose puff. She was wearing sweatpants and an old college hoodie she usually only wore when she was sick. Her shoulders slumped as she walked up the path. She hesitated at the front door, staring at it for a long moment, like she was gathering courage. The doorbell rang. I took my time standing up, not out of cruelty, but because this was my house now, legally and emotionally. I opened the door. Hi, Aisha said, her voice barely above a whisper. Can we talk, please? I stepped aside and let her in. She glanced around the living room like she was seeing it for the first time. I had rearranged some furniture, hung a couple of new pictures, and moved the television to the opposite wall. Small changes, but they probably felt huge to her. Do you want some coffee? I asked, more out of habit than hospitality. Sure, she said, following me into the kitchen and sitting at the breakfast bar, where we had shared countless meals over the years. As I made the coffee, I could feel her eyes on me. She was probably looking for signs that I missed her or regretted my decision. She was going to be disappointed. I slid a mug across the counter to her. So, I said, taking my own mug in hand, what is on your mind? Aisha wrapped her hands around her cup, like she was trying to absorb its warmth. Everything is falling apart, she said finally. Tanisha and Adrian are officially divorced. The papers went through last week. I nodded. I had run into Adrian at the hardware store a few days earlier. He seemed lighter. He mentioned he was seeing someone new who thought relationships were about teamwork, not competition. Keisha cannot get Reginald to return her calls. Aisha continued. She drove to his apartment last weekend, and he would not even come to the door. She has been staying at her mother's place, crying constantly. Aisha's voice cracked. And Lauren and Jared, it is bad. I heard about the restraining order, I said. Aisha nodded miserably. She went to the fire station again last Tuesday and caused such a scene that his captain threatened to report her, Aisha said. Then she followed him home and sat in the parking lot for hours. The neighbors called the police. Jared finally filed the paperwork. She blames you for everything. Of course she does, I said dryly. So it is my fault she is stalking her ex-boyfriend? Aisha flinched at my tone. She keeps saying if you had just acted like a normal husband and fought for our marriage, none of this would have happened, Aisha said. She says you embarrassed all of us by walking out. Interesting logic, I replied. So what do you think? Aisha stared into her coffee. I have not spoken to any of them in 2 weeks, she said softly. Every conversation turns into an argument about whose fault this all is. My conclusion is that I lost my marriage, my friends, and my sense of who I am, all because I listened to people who thought they knew better than me. She started crying again, quiet tears sliding down her cheeks. Lauren kept saying you did not appreciate me. Aisha went on. She said you took me for granted and that I deserved a man who would fight for me, who would prove his love when challenged. Aisha wiped her nose with a napkin I slid across the counter. But the truth is, you show me every day that you loved me, she said. You just did it quietly. You came home every night. You remembered the little things. You worked hard. You did chores without me asking. You did not make grand speeches, but you were consistent. I did not see the value in that until it was gone. I leaned against the counter, studying this woman I had shared 4 years of my life with. So what changed your mind? I asked. What made you finally realize Lauren was wrong? Aisha looked up at me, eyes red. Living without you, she said simply. These past 4.5 months have been the loneliest of my life. Not just because you were not there, but because I realized the friends I thought I could count on were more interested in drama than actually supporting me. She took a shaky breath. Tanisha only called to complain about Adrian, Aisha said. She never asked how I was handling the divorce. Keisha only wanted to talk about Reginald and whether she should try some grand gesture to win him back. And Lauren, Aisha shook her head. Lauren kept insisting everything would have been fine if you had just reacted the way you were supposed to. The way I was supposed to? I repeated. She had this whole script, Aisha said. You were supposed to get angry, maybe make a scene in a restaurant, then realize how much you loved me and beg for another chance. She said most men would have done that, and the fact that you did not proved you were not worthy of me. I almost laughed at the absurdity of it. So by respecting your stated wishes and treating you like an adult capable of making her own decisions, I failed a test I did not know I was taking, I said. That is exactly what she said, Aisha replied. Her voice grew smaller. But I have had months to think about it, and I realized something. If someone has to test your love, maybe they do not deserve it. That was probably the most insightful thing I had heard her say in years, but it was 4.5 months too late. I also realized, Aisha continued, that the kind of love Lauren was talking about is not love at all. It is possession. It is ego. It is thinking your partner exists to perform for you rather than to build something with you. I nodded. That is a pretty mature way to look at it, I said. Aisha gave a short, bitter laugh. Too mature, too late, she replied. I know you have already made up your mind about us. I can see it in your eyes. You have moved on. I did not answer right away. I took a sip of my coffee. I moved on the night you asked for a divorce, I said gently. When someone tells me they do not want to be married to me anymore, I believe them, even if they did not mean it. Especially then, because it means they are willing to gamble with something precious just to see what happens. That is not the kind of person I want to build a life with. Aisha nodded slowly, tears flowing freely now. I understand, she said. I just had to try. I had to at least see if there was any chance. There is not, I said, not unkindly, but firmly. What we had is gone. It died that night at the restaurant, killed by people who thought marriage was a game and that consequences did not matter. I ran into your sister at the grocery store last week, Aisha said suddenly, wiping her eyes. Nicole was polite but cold. She said she was glad you were doing well and moving forward with your life. She did not say much else, but before she walked away, she said something that stuck with me. Aisha stared at the window while she spoke. She told me, Aisha, you had a man who came home every night, who never cheated, who worked hard and treated you well. And you threw it away because your friends convinced you it was not dramatic enough. Aisha turned back to me. Is that true? Did I really throw away something good because it was not exciting enough? That is a question you will have to answer for yourself, I said. But I will say this. I gave you the best marriage I knew how to give. Faithful, consistent, supportive. If that was not enough, then we were never going to work anyway. Aisha stood and walked to the kitchen window, looking out the backyard where we had hosted barbecues, birthday parties, and lazy Sunday afternoons. Lauren told me something last week that finally opened my eyes, she said without turning around. She said Tanisha is better off without Adrian because he was boring. She said Keisha dodged a bullet with Reginald because he was too sensitive. Aisha turned back to face me. When I asked what she thought about you, she said you were probably gay because what kind of man does not fight for his woman? I raised an eyebrow. Charming, I said. Aisha gave a tired, humorless smile. That was when I realized she had never actually cared about any of our relationships, she said. She just liked the drama, the chaos, the feeling of being in control. She destroyed 3 marriages and a long-term relationship and still thinks she was helping. I said, some people are addicted to crisis. They create problems because fixing problems makes them feel important. I am thinking of moving, Aisha said suddenly. Maybe back to my parents' town, or somewhere completely new. I cannot stay here. Every restaurant, every store, every street reminds me of what I lost. That might be good for you, I said honestly. A fresh start, new perspective. Distance. Will you hate me forever? She asked, her voice barely audible. I consider the question. I do not hate you, Aisha, I said. I am disappointed in the choices you made, and I am angry about the way it all happened. But I do not hate you. You're not a terrible person. You trusted the wrong people and made a terrible decision. A decision that cost me everything and showed me who you are when the pressure is on. Unfortunately, that person is not someone I can trust with my heart. Aisha nodded, accepting the finality in my words. She walked back to the breakfast bar and picked up her purse. I signed the final papers yesterday, she said. My lawyer will have them to yours by tomorrow morning. The house is yours, obviously, since I am the one who wanted out. I took what was mine from the bedroom and left the rest. I appreciate that, I said, and I meant it. She could have made the divorce uglier and far more expensive if she had wanted to. There's one more thing, Aisha added, pausing in the doorway of the kitchen. I wrote letters to Tanisha, Keisha, and Lauren. Letters, I repeated. She nodded. I told them exactly what I thought about their help and how it destroyed my life, she said. I probably should have done it months ago. I told Tanisha that I know she followed along because she liked the entertainment. I told Keisha that she was so obsessed with being loyal to her friends that she forgot to be honest. And I told Lauren that she does not know the first thing about love. How do they take it? I asked. Tanisha cried and apologized. Aisha said. She said she never meant for it to go this far and that she wishes she could take it back. Keisha got defensive and said I was blaming my friends for my own choices. She said I am just looking for someone else to blame. Aisha's mouth tightened. And Lauren, she said, called me an ungrateful woman who deserves to be alone if I cannot appreciate good advice when I get it. She said she hopes I learn my lesson about trusting weak men who do not know how to fight for what they want. That sounds exactly like each of them, I said. Aisha gave a small nod. But I did learn a lesson, she said quietly. Just not the one Lauren intended. I learned the strongest thing a person can do is walk away from someone who does not value them. I learned that fighting for someone who is testing you is not love. It is desperation. And that when someone shows you who they really are, you should listen the first time. I walked her to the front door. She paused on the threshold and looked back at me, her eyes shining with tears. For what it is worth, Aisha said, you were probably the best husband I could have had. I'm sorry I realized it too late. Take care of yourself, Elijah. I genuinely hope you find what you are looking for, Aisha, I said. She nodded, turned, and walked to her car without looking back. I watched her drive away, the sedan shrinking down the street until it turned the corner and disappeared. I closed the door and leaned against it for a moment. 4.5 months earlier, Aisha and her friends had thought they were testing my love. Instead, they had tested their own character and found it lacking. The manipulators had been caught in their own schemes. The self-proclaimed drama queens had been upstaged by the consequences of their own actions. I walked back to my office, sat down, and picked up the pen lying beside the divorce papers. I signed where I needed to sign, the ink drying quickly on the clean white lines. When I was done, I set the pen down and stared at the documents for a moment. The house was mine. My life was mine again. No more hidden tests. No more games designed by people who confuse chaos with passion. I went to the kitchen, poured myself a drink, and stood by the window, looking out at the quiet street. I raised the glass slightly to no one in particular. Sometimes the best way to win is to refuse to play the game. If you enjoyed this story, please like, comment, and share this video with your friends. Subscribe and turn on the notification bell so you never miss a powerful story drop.